On Insightful Inspiration, Isabel Launderville chats with a mosaic of brilliant individuals that help shape the insights industry. We live stream episodes to LinkedIn, and you can listen on all major podcast networks. Join us, and please subscribe so you won't miss our guests' insightful inspiration and hear what drives them and how they get inspired to be successful in the insights industry and beyond. Insightful Inspiration is brought to you by Sylvester & Co., an award-winning qualitative research firm with half a century of experience.
Welcome to episode 17 of Insightful Inspiration, your go-to podcast for uncovering the secrets behind consumer behavior and effective marketing strategies. Understanding how consumers make default decisions is crucial for brands looking to connect authentically and drive results. But what really influences those choices? How can marketers leverage this knowledge to improve campaign effectiveness? And that's what we're unpacking and exploring to draw inspiration today. I'm your host, Isabel Launderville, President and Chief Insight Seeker at Sylvester & Co., where we've been dedicating to understanding people for 5 decades now, a little bit more even. As always, feel free to comment during the live broadcast, leave your thoughts on Spotify. We always love to keep the conversation going. It is what we do for a living. So today, I'm thrilled to welcome Nancy Harhut, an award-winning author, international keynote speaker, and Chief Creative Officer at HBT Marketing. Nancy is renowned for combining marketing best practices with insights from social scientists and behavioral economists to boost engagement and response rates. Her unique approach has made her a sought-after expert in the field of behavioral science-driven marketing. And I'm so excited to have her today and join us for this enlightening conversation about consumer making decisions. And after the CRC keynote address she gave a few weeks back, I am so excited. You're in for a treat. So welcome, Nancy. How are you? Fabulous. Can you hear me?
I think so, yes. Can you hear me?
You're here. Okay, perfect. I missed that first sentence. I think the audio just went out for a minute there. Welcome so much. Thank you so much for joining me.
I was just saying thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is fabulous. I mean, let's anchor ourselves in this topic and your expertise, really. Your work focuses on really applying behavioral science to marketing. I think when I saw you at the CRC, you had such amazing, super actionable sort of strategies and sort of tactics and whatnot. And I just wanted to go back and maybe anchor ourselves in what is behavioral science? Like, why does it matter? What does it mean? How about we start with that and then keep going?
Sure. That's a great place to start. And thank you, by the way, for your kind words about the presentation at CRC. It was great. I really enjoyed being there, and what a fantastic group of people. But yes, to your question about behavioral science, so some people hear behavioral science and they're like, science, is it, I don't know, white lab coats and test tubes and, the periodic table of elements, like what's going on here? And really, behavioral science very simply is the study of how people behave, or more specifically, why they do what they do. And in marketing, we want to get people to do certain things. We want them to try or buy again, or recommend, or become our advocates. And so it's important for us to know why people do what they do. And it turns out that behavioral scientists have studied exactly how people make decisions. And what they found is very often they don't make decisions so much as default to them, right? Over the ages, humans have developed these decision-making shortcuts, these automatic, instinctive, reflexive responses. We cruise along through life on autopilot. We encounter a certain situation, and we just default to these hardwired behaviors, giving the matter at hand little, if any. If we're aware of these faults, these decision-making shortcuts that people rely on, it puts us in a position to create messages that tap into those decision defaults, that work with the way the brain works as opposed to against it. And the net there is we're increasing the likelihood that we will get the engagement and the response that we're looking for. No silver bullet, no magic wand, but we really do increase the likelihood that people will respond if we start to work with the brain as opposed to against it.
And can you share some examples of what some of those defaults would be that you can play into and tap into?
Yeah, sure. So a very common one is the idea of social proof, and many of your listeners may be aware of it, but it's this idea that when we're not certain of what to do, we look around, we see what other people are doing, and we follow their lead. So if a bunch of other people are doing something, we think, A, It must be safe. It's probably a safe choice for me. I'm not really sure what to do, but they're all doing it. Can't be wrong. And B, gosh, if I don't do it, I might be missing out on something, and I don't want to miss
Mm.
out. I don't want to feel like I'm missing out. So there's the idea of social proof, and then I just mentioned the words "miss out," and that leads me to another one, which is really interesting. It's this idea of loss aversion, and what behavioral scientists have found is people are actually twice as motivated to avoid the pain of loss as they are to achieve the pleasure of gain. But what do we do in marketing? We double down on the gains, right? We focus on the gains, the advantages, the wonderful things that will happen if you just do what I'm asking you to do. Just click the link, just come to my website, just my store, pick up the phone, buy a product, and all these wonderful things will happen. You'll gain all of this great stuff. And we know that gains and benefits are effective, but it turns out that the thing that can be even twice as effective is the idea of loss. So maybe instead of telling people to take advantage of, we say, don't miss out on. Maybe we talk about the pain someone can avoid if they do what we're asking them to do, or the pain they may find themselves in if they fail to do what we're asking them to do. But loss aversion can be very, very powerful. And then I think one more example would be the idea of autonomy bias. And what behavioral scientists have found is people have this deep seated desire to exert some kind of control over themselves and their environment. We don't like to be told what to do. We don't like to feel like we're forced into something. We like to be the ones that call the shots. So anytime we as marketers can make people feel that they're in charge, that's a really good thing. And a great way to make people feel they're in charge is to give them choices. Because by
Mm.
definition, if I'm choosing, then I'm the one in charge. And there's some research that shows that you can tell someone what you want them to do. You can ask them to do it. And if you follow the request with the BYAF technique, but you are free. So if you tell them what you want them to do, ask them to
Mm.
do it, and then say, "You're free to choose," or "The choice is yours," or "It's up to you." You can, on average, double the likelihood people will do what you're asking them to do. So it's really fascinating, these little triggers or nudges or prompts that
Mhm.
just get people to default to a decision. And again, as marketers, when we're aware of it, it just makes our ability to connect with people and to get the response that we're looking for so much better.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I love the last one because I've said sort of in a presentation, I speak quite a bit. And in the presentation, I was talking about something we were doing and we had experimented with and we were sort of collaborating. And I said, we're not the only ones doing this. We are doing this. We're dabbling into it, but others are doing it. And others might be doing it better. And it's interesting because I don't know if there's a correlation, but listening to you, that was the only time I actually said that in a speaking engagement. And that is probably the speaking engagement that I got the most traction from and the most people coming up to me and saying, so you're not the only ones, but how do you do it? Like there was something really interesting in that. And I don't know if there's something there, but maybe listening to you, maybe there was. Maybe I was more strategic than I thought. I was trying to be Canadian and humble, but maybe maybe that wasn't the case.
Well, I mean, there's definitely there's something to be said for authenticity, right?
Mhm.
And you're being honest. You're like, look, in a world where everybody is hyping, everyone's the best, the most, the only. You're saying, hey, look, we're not the only ones doing this. So right away,
Mhm.
you're connecting, I think, with your audience,
Mhm.
and then maybe they're a little curious. Well, all right, if you're not the only ones, but what is it that that would make me want to choose you? What is it that that keeps you in business? So that pulls people in, and then at CRC, we talked about something called the pratfall effect, where you can take it one step further and you can actually mention something that you're not particularly good at, and it just makes you seem more genuine. It's a good example would be Heinz ketchup. They lean into the fact that it takes a long time to come out of the bottle. It doesn't materially impact the quality of the ketchup. It's the leading, world's leading brand of ketchup, but it does take a while to get out. And so they embraced it. They ran radios or TV spots rather with the song Anticipation behind it.
Mhm.
They created a label that they put on the bottle, and the only way the label read upright was when the bottle was tilted in the right way for the ketchup to optimally flow out. But hey, saying, hey, look, we're not the only ones is maybe a form of that. It's kind of embracing, we're not the only ones. But let me tell you what we do really well, and let me tell you why our customers and our clients come to us. And I think that can be very intriguing. So yeah, you're onto something.
Mhm. I think it's about connecting with people. And interestingly, like if people are people want to dabble, or if the listeners want to dabble into this, and it's getting a lot of attention right now, and behavioral science is becoming sort of top of mind. if people want to start using it and tapping into it, what would be their like number one starting point in your mind? What would
Well,
be your guiding principles?
I think, the first thing you have to think of is, or first thing you have to keep in mind is that people don't make decisions the way we think they do. Very often, uh, we assume that they make these well thought out, well considered decisions. And the reason we think that is I think I make well thought out, well considered decisions. Isabel, you probably think the same. Like we all think that we know why we do what we do. We have a good reason for it. We're not influenced by advertising. We're not influenced by other people. We do what we want to do. And to a certain extent, that's true, but it's not 100% of the time. It's far less than 100% of the time. Very often, we're influenced by not even aware of. And so we need to keep that in mind because, as I said, we think we make good decisions, and by extension, we think our customers and prospects do. So we think we just get them the right information at the right time, to the right people, we're going to get the right result. And that doesn't necessarily happen. Very often, it doesn't happen because, again, people aren't really thoughtfully considering our
Yeah.
messages. They're not thoughtfully consuming our marketing content. They're reacting automatically. So one of the first places, marketers and brands should begin, to keep that in mind, to realize, okay, it's for me to just lay out this rational argument with all facts and figures and all the necessary information and just expect that people will come to the logical conclusion because that's not what's going to happen. They're going to respond emotionally. They're going to respond using decision shortcuts. They're going to sometimes even make decisions that if they'd stopped to really think about things, they wouldn't have made. But in the
Mhm.
moment, they're making them because they're not really thinking about them. And so, as marketers, we want to factor that into our strategies and into our creative executions. We want to factor it into the way we deal with our customers and prospects. And of course, we want to do it in an ethical way. As I talk about this, you might say, well, so people sometimes make decisions that aren't the best for them. Well, that doesn't sound great. So obviously, as marketers, when we say something, we talked earlier about social proof. People do what other people do. If we're going to
Mhm.
use social proof, we want to make sure that we're using it honestly. I don't want to say, hey, 100,000 people have already bought my product if that's not true. Because
Yeah.
when I get caught in that lie, and I will, it's going to backfire on me. And then you erode trust and you'll never get it back. So if, lots and lots of people have used my product, I want to say that because that will be helpful for prospective customers to know that. And in a result, and in return, I should say, it'll be helpful for me as a brand. But if it's not the case, don't say it. Even if you'd get that short-term win, and the long term you lose. So,
Mhm.
so I think those are some of the things we need to keep in mind as we start to dabble in this.
Yeah. I'm really hearing there's something about working with humans and how they make decisions and sort of leaning into that versus trying to bring sort of consumers and people and how they're hardwired to marketers. It's sort of leaning into that and how they're hardwired and whatnot. Can we, or have you seen, do you have an example, or is it even possible to create sort of something new, to rewire people up to a certain point? Can you teach a new trick? Can you hardwire, or do you have to just lean in and embrace and use it that way?
Well, I think
It's a
the
tough
human
one. I
brain is
know.
the human brain, right? It's a
Yeah.
tough one. The human brain is the human brain. It hasn't really changed a lot in the many 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 years we've been around. Um, but that said, that gives us an opportunity as marketers because we can tap into some of these hardwired responses that have developed over the ages that are just there, right? They're hardwired. But we do have an opportunity as marketers to maybe help change the way people think. One option is to use something called framing. And what
Mhm.
we found is the words that we use to describe our product, our service, our company, our value proposition, the words that we choose don't only convey information, they also influence how people react to that information. And
Mm.
what that means is it's not enough just to have, something that's technically accurate out there. We want to think about the individual words that we choose and the language that we choose because it can produce a different response. The classic example is, this glass is half empty, this glass is half full. Well, how I describe it influences how you see it. So
Yeah.
if I'm coming out with a new product or a product extension, I have a great opportunity to influence how you're going to perceive it. And so I want to carefully choose my words so that I can help shape the narrative. I can influence the way things from the get go. You see them the way I want to see them. So there are opportunities that we
Mhm.
have to change people's thinking, to change the way they see us or our products. But often we're working against these very hardwired behaviors that people aren't even conscious of. They're, like I said, they're cruising along through autopilot. I mean, it's interesting, like when you're talking to focus group participants, or you're doing market
Mhm.
research, there are probably certain opportunities that you have where you're like, okay, if I do this, this is very likely going to happen, and if I do that, it's very likely not going to happen. So it's like
Yeah.
you can do your job one of two ways.
Mhm.
Get a point across one of two ways. If I do it this way, I can count on this, and if I do it this way, I might be opening up a world of pain that I don't want to deal with. Is that
Yeah.
true? I've never had I've never
Oh,
done a focus group, so I can't. But I've watched a lot of them. So
so yeah, so I've done focus groups for about 25 years or so. Well, next year, 25 years. I feel like I need to tell you my age now. But anyways, I started really young. I've got good
you
creams,
started
whatever the
very young,
excuse
like they
is.
had that nursery school.
Well, I started, I was 18, so I did
That
start
nursery
really
school
young.
program.
But yeah.
Okay, there we go.
This
Yeah.
is, yeah, it's not a second career, unlike probably a lot of colleagues. But all to say, I do think there's a few things, and it's really interesting. So when I started moderating, it was really interesting because I was 18. And so there's some things that you can do as an 18-year-old that, as a 43-year-old today, I have different tools. I project something differently and so forth. And when you're moderating, to your point, you have to be very self-aware, of your reaction, of your sort of your tone of voice, your nonverbal and whatnot, whether it's virtual or in person. And I found I worked a lot and talked a lot with psychologists and whatnot, and just working the room and moving and leaning and sort of all of that, because I'm quite tall as well. So I had to like not tower people when I move and then lean in and blah, 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 and all of that. And so it's really interesting how, to your point, I've learned that I can really truly connect with people and have a good group if after my introduction, when they sort of, I pass the baton to them so that we make friends, I literally say, let's make friends. And if I can probe and get a laugh out of one respondent and then the group partakes, I've got the group. Then the group suddenly ends up being go from 6 individuals to a group, and now it's like everybody's shoulders go down. There's something about that initial laughter within the first 10 minutes that, to your point, will be a game changer. Now, I don't know if it's psychology or if that is behavioral science. You tell me, you're the expert, but that is definitely something I've seen for sure.
Well, I love that because you're talking about, you talk about like moving around the room. You talked about, opening with something that gets people to laugh. And these are all, certain cues that people may not even pick up on. Like
Mm.
when the group, concludes, if you would say to them, how was the group? Or if, they went home and their spouse said, how was the group? They very likely wouldn't have said, well, the moderator is really good and I trusted her because she got up and she moved around the room. Or I really felt more forthcoming because she made me laugh in the beginning. Like people aren't usually that aware, and yet that's exactly what happened. And
Yeah.
I think the same thing happens when we're doing marketing materials. There are these little cues that people aren't necessarily aware of, but they make us trust the brand more. They make us feel more confident. They make us choose one brand over another. And, when we're later asked, we will point to a very legitimate explanation. Oh, I chose that brand because, they have, 20 years of experience or something. But really, we chose it because there was something in the advertising that we're not aware
Mhm.
of it. So we point to kind of the rational reason, but there was an emotional one there, or there was some other factor that was
Yeah.
prompting us to go in that direction. And it sounds like, I mean, it certainly works in marketing and sales, and it certainly sounds like it works when you're, interviewing people, when you're conducting a group, because the vibe in that room and the amount of trust that people feel certainly would influence how they respond, whether or not they're open to you, whether
Mhm.
they're willing to share. And so it's in many respects it's similar. We want to get that baseline and drop those cues in there so that we get the response we're hoping for, whether we're interviewing somebody or whether we're trying to
Mhm.
sell somebody. But
Yeah.
but if people cruise along on autopilot, throughout life. It's not like, oh, I'm in shopping mode, I'm on autopilot, I'm in work mode, I'm in, we're just always, it's
Yes.
rare that we pull ourselves out of it. So it's not surprising these techniques are applicable
Mhm.
across the board.
Yeah, and how many times have we, driven from point A and point B, and we get to point B and we go, "How did I get here?" Like, we consciously know, and we try to rationalize, we try to explain it. But I feel like it's also, for lack of better phrasing, a perfect storm. It's not just one thing in sort of in that moment. It's how, like when I said, this building rapport, making friends with people, it is sort of the tone, it is which respondent I make laugh, why that respond. Like there is kind of a way and a magic to it. It's not just taking sort of the principle, taking like this notion or the idea of making someone laugh within the first 10 minutes. It's how you go about it, which person you choose, like you sort of home in on, how you go about it, the timing of it all, the reaction of the others, how you sort of make the others sort of fold into or bring the others into that fold. So I'm questioning using that example. I'm thinking it's kind of the same thing on your end, right? You can't just take one of those principles that you've talked about and just directly apply it without having intent of how it fits into the entire campaign, right?
You're absolutely right. In fact, what you're saying makes me think of two things. One is, you can't just clumsily apply a principle, a behavioral science principle, and expect it's always going to work, or just expect it's going to work that time. Maybe you heard about it in a podcast, maybe you read about it in a book, maybe you went to a seminar and you learned about it, and you're like, okay, great, I'm going to use it. But it's not always going to work, and B, how you apply it has the context has a huge impact in whether or not something is going to be successful. So sometimes, people will hear about behavioral science and they're like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Let me. And then the one thing they try, if it doesn't give them the lift in response they were hoping, they say, oh, it doesn't work for us. And that can be a mistake because it maybe just didn't work in that particular time, or maybe the context was wrong, or maybe you didn't apply it quite
Mhm.
properly. After all, it's the first time you're doing it, as opposed to somebody who's got a little bit more experience, a little bit more of a point of view, and knows how to um, skillfully insert these. And then the second thing it made me think of is, very often it's not just one tactic. Sometimes we'll set up a test. It's a very strict A/B test where there will be a single variable because we specifically want to
Mm.
see the impact. But very often, if I'm working on an email campaign for a client, or a direct mail piece for a client, or a landing page, I'll use several behavioral science tactics because the
Mm.
sum total is greater than any individual one. So if I have an opportunity to, work in a little bit of autonomy bias, a little bit of social proof, a little bit of loss aversion, a little bit of, the reason why, behavioral scientists find that people are more likely to do what we ask them to do if we give them a reason why. If I can put some of those things into a single piece, I'm actually stacking the deck in my client's favor, and I think that's an important consideration too.
Hmm. That's awesome. And so I just wanted to, like, selfishly, actually, ask you for a bit of advice here. I never get to actually fulfill my own curiosity just because of what I do for a living. And so I'm like, okay, this is my shot. So tapping into loss aversion, this notion of the fear of missing out or the pain of is greater and more motivating than the benefits. In my line of work, I sort of test a lot of consumer attention statements and brand positioning statements. And there's always this notion of, that consumer, that problem to be solved, whether your problem let's assume your problem and your brand solves a problem, because that's not always the case. So let's take that off the table. So assuming your problem or your brand solves a problem, most people don't want to relate or connect with a negative sentence when it comes to the way a problem is articulated. So I'm trying to sort of, so because fear of loss is it always articulated in a negative way? Maybe that's the question.
I missed the last thing you said. Is fear of loss
Oh,
always what?
is it always articulated in a negative way? Because every time I test something and the phrase is negatively articulated, people go, no, no. And I want positive things. I want sunshine. So nothing gets through research. And I'm like, is there something there? So I'm like, is there something there, Nancy? Tell me.
Sure, sure. No, I'm going to be I'm going to identify with this because you're saying if you try to phrase something negatively, you can't get it through research. Very often, the same thing happens on the marketing side, right? We'll write something, and the client will be like, "Oh, no, no, no. Make that more positive. Don't say it that way. That's too negative. Let's
Mhm,
make it more positive." And the way that I've seen some success is by saying, "Well, let's test it. All right, let's test it. We'll test it this way and that way, and we'll see which one works." A colleague of mine was doing some work for a company that helped clients pass their ISO certification. Hired this company, you would hire them so that you could get your certification. And he tested two lines. He said, "ISO certification, will your company pass?" And he tested it against ISO
mhm,
certification, will your company fail? And the latter one, the loss aversion one, will your company fail, won hands down. Even though the company was like, that's not going to work. We sell the ability to help people pass. That's the benefit.
mhm.
We want to focus on the benefit because that's what people are going to get from us. So why would we frame it in the negative? But using the negative actually got, more response. So one thing I do is I propose we test it. We test the positive against the negative and let the market tell us. Other times I'll point to research and just say, listen, you know, research shows you're twice as motivated to avoid loss. So, if you want to go out, and stack the deck, let's give this a try. Let's use it this way. But I totally
Mhm.
hear where you're coming from. People want to be sunny and they want to have rainbows and they don't want to be negative. But the truth of the
Yeah,
matter is, as much as we like to save money, what do we like even more than saving money? We like knowing we didn't pay more than the next person did for the
yeah,
same thing, right? That's a loss. We've spent more than
yeah.
the next person, so we've lost money. We don't want to do that. So it's really a hardwired response in humans. We do not like to lose. And that's why I say, I push for it. I try to point to the research or I try to suggest we test.
Yeah, and I think I'm listening to you and I'm hearing you test and market in real time just to see what the results are versus testing it, asking people questions about it and sort of seeing which one. I think there's a different way to test it properly. And I always go back, like in my field, there's a lot of system one, system two kind of thinking and whatnot. And it's interesting because just your two examples around the ISO certification, will your company pass? Will your company fail? Just me, myself, and it elicited a completely different emotional response. One was, oh my God, I need to move, that I cannot fail at something. I'm hardwired not to fail as a person, therefore. Whereas the other, I'm like, sure. So you could see that, sample of one, but I could sort of see the emotional reaction and all of that. And I think that's kind of, as a moderator, when you do focus group, I do think there's something about tapping into that system when that autopilot, which is, what does this elicit? You're hearing that. What's the emotion as you were hearing it versus asking people, does this resonate with you? I think I think then you tap into the emotional and your research will probably be closer to your test and you might get it past research. How do you feel about that? Does that sound like a good solve to get it through research?
So yes, I no, I mean, I think it does. I think you're absolutely right. You're saying like you're just a focus group of one, but it's like on one you really felt it and the other you didn't. And
Mhm.
I- you know, I think going for that emotional response and thinking about how people are going to receive the information, really makes a difference. And if we can tee it up in a way that gets people to respond, we're going to get the answer we're looking for, but we're looking for an answer,
Mhm.
and we're more likely to get
Yeah.
the answer than serving something up in a way that's just a little bit more vanilla. Um,
Mhm.
so
Yeah.
that's why I'm a fan of it.
And you were saying something earlier on that in your line of work, you might actually use a few things. You might not just copy paste and use one, but there is kind of a system to it if you can use one versus the other and serve. How do you balance creativity and the science in activating behavioral science?
Yeah, that's a good question because some people might think, it's just another constraint, right? But it's not actually. It's another tool. That's the way I look at it.
Mhm.
If as a you know as a agency creative person where I'm trying to solve my clients' marketing challenges, the more information I have, the better. So a lot of times clients will come to us and they'll say, here's what we're hoping people will do. Here's what we're hoping our clients and our customers and prospects will do. And here's the reasons why they should do it, right? They should buy our
Mhm.
product because of this, this, and this. Great, we
Mhm.
need that. But then we like to push them a little bit further and say, but why might they not? And a lot of times companies haven't really
Mm.
gotten there. They haven't really thought about it. They invest a lot of time as someone should do something, but sure, some people will, but there's going to be a lot of other people that don't. So why aren't those people? And then what can we do to convince those people? So let's think about why they might not want to do something, and then let's see how we can kind of those buying barriers. And that's where the behavioral science can really come into play. You've got a company and you're expanding from the East Coast to the West Coast. Why might somebody on the
Mhm.
West Coast not want to buy? Well, perhaps they haven't heard of you, right? You're popular on the East Coast, but they live on the West Coast. Maybe they haven't heard of you. So if that's the case, then maybe we say, well, we can use some authority principle. We can say that, we've been endorsed by the American Dental Association. We've been seen on, NBC. We've been written, whatever it is, because, these are considered if it's in Wired magazine, if they must be good. Or maybe I
Mhm.
use social proof. I say, hey, we've got over 1 million customers. Granted, they're on the East Coast, but still, if 1 million customers, and especially if I said, over 1 million accountants have chosen our software. Well, maybe I live on the West Coast, but I'm an accountant, and it's like, well, all right, if 1 million accountants have already chosen the software, um, so that your question about balancing the creativity, I find that the actually allows us to be coming up with effective
Mm.
solutions, because as we start to know the decision making shortcuts that people use, the decision to fall on, the more we know about that, the more artful, the more creative, the more ingenious we can become in crafting a message that's really going to connect, that's going to cut through the clutter, and that's going to get somebody to actually respond. So I think that they work very well together. It's not an either or. It's more of an additive
Mhm.
with the two, with the right creativity and the addition of the behavioral science. It creates a 1-2 punch that makes it more likely people are going to do what we're asking them to do.
Yeah. I think that's fabulous. I really like how it unleashes creativity because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm listening to you and I'm thinking it probably is because advertising at the end of the day, there's an art to it, there's a lot of creativity in it, but it has to drive results. And so it has to be very purposeful, very mindful, very intentional. And I guess the behavioral science principles are giving you that intent and that purpose and such clarity with regards to that, right?
Yeah, I think that's a perfect way to describe it. We do have to be intentional. We do have to be purposeful, and the behavioral science is definitely something that helps. It's a tool that we can use, and frankly, without it, I believe that I can only get so far. And we
Mm.
like her. And so that's what just making pretty pictures. We're not just, writing wonderful turns of phrase. We're doing it in service of a business, of a corporate goal, right? We're trying to do something. We're trying to influence behavior. As I said earlier, whether we're trying to get someone to buy or to recommend us or become our, brand advocates, we're trying, or even to offer up some bit of data about themselves that we can then use to help remarket to them, right? But we're trying to get them to take some kind of action. We're trying to influence their behavior, and so as a result, we want to use whatever we can to make that happen. We're not existing simply to entertain or to educate or to amuse. That's maybe part of our goal, but at the end of the day, we want more than that. Oh, that was really nice, and then you move on. No, we want like, oh, that was really nice, and I want to buy one. I want to sign up
Mhm.
more. And that's why we need the behavioral science, and it does.
Yeah, it's not just about perception, it's about intent,
And
it's about driving behavior, which I think is it's getting people to move on the information and the marketing that you're putting out there, which is a game changer. And sort of you're very passionate, you love this, you can probably eat it up. Tell me, where do you see this going in 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years from now? What's the wish and the hope if or the foresight that you might have for behavioral science and marketing?
Yeah, that's a good question, Isabel. I think, I mean, more and more people are getting interested in behavioral science. More and more companies are embracing it. You're starting to see behavioral scientists at the C-suite level, chief behavioral
Mhm.
scientist or, SVP of behavioral science. Like, so more and more companies are starting to embrace it. And so I believe that that trend will continue. Some people are saying, are we going to at some point, arrive at this idea that we don't need a separate, I don't know, department or division, but should it just kind of percolate through everything? So that, if you're in the sales department, you think about behavioral science. If you're in marketing, if you're in customer service, always a behavioral science component to the way you're thinking. And that may come in time, probably not in the next 3 or 4 years, but perhaps in time. Um, but I think what we are going to see is kind of this intersection of data science and decision science. So data science will tell us
Mm,
uh, which message, which target market, which segment of our audience deserves which message, and where we should find them, and the most efficient way to find them. And then the decision science or the behavioral science will inform how that message should be structured or created or served up so that it's most likely to capture attention, to be understood, to be remembered, and to be acted upon. So I think it's that nice combination of perhaps AI fueled decision science and behavior or AI fueled data science and
mhm.
behavioral science fueled decision science. And I think that's where we're headed in the near future.
Yeah. And so I think that's really fascinating. And so it's all about connecting with people, making them sort of tap in a more meaningful way. And I always found in my line of work that there is a culture plays into it, language plays into it. There's a whole bunch of different things that factors in and how you connect, how you build rapport, how you build trust. So is that also true of behavioral science? Or is that more of a universal sort of grounding factor?
So, the influence or the impact of culture, you're asking, is that right?
Yeah, the impact of culture or generation, or does that factor in to behavioral science? Is that something to be mindful of?
So I think when we talk about behavioral science, we're talking about how people make decisions, and it's fairly universal. But that said, as you start to kind of peel back the layers of the onion, you start to see differences. So there are some examples where women respond differently to men for different messages. So women are more community oriented. Together, what we can accomplish this. Men, research shows a little bit more competitive. They like to benchmark against each other. There are some studies that show that Western Western countries, if you will, versus Eastern countries respond differently. In the West, we can be we can be more competitive, more me focused, and in the East,
Mhm,
it's more, well, how does the company benefit, or how does the entire community benefit? There's some research that shows that, we've talked a little bit about loss aversion, that while it's very potent, it's not as effective with people who are older. You hit a certain age
mm,
and you just don't seem to care, and you don't seem to want to focus on anything negative. So there's a baseline where these are all solid and worth
mhm.
working with. But then as we start to get into certain nuances, there are cultural differences, geographic differences, age and gender differences, but they're more nuances. But again, as we dive into the work, we can start to create more nuanced
Mhm.
executions. But at a baseline, the behavioral science is applicable across humankind, if you will, across all people.
That's awesome. And so it does always come back to, if you want to truly and deeply connect with someone, you have to know them. You have to know, which generation they're part of, what's the culture, what they're doing, either want to do or actually don't want to do or don't want to miss. It really is fascinating to me that the older you get, the less fear of missing out you have. I think it makes a lot of sense, probably, but yeah, I think that's really interesting, actually. I don't know if it has to do with confidence or it has to do with simplicity or comfort, or I think maybe a perfect storm of all those things. Yeah, I think it's interesting.
Yeah, it might just be that you get to a certain point, and you're just not interested in anything other than what's going to make you happy. It's like you've lived your life, you've been through it all, and you're like, you know what? I'm on firmer footing. I'm better able to weather the storm. I'm just a lot in my time, and now I'm just not going to allow myself to get rattled. And you're not going to frighten me. And I'm also, maybe looking at the back nine or whatever you want to call it. Like, I don't have that much time left, and I just
Yeah.
choose to focus on things that are happier. I'm not really sure what the answer is, but it is fascinating. I did read the
Hmm.
research finding that older people are a little less apt to respond to loss aversion. And I guess there could be a
Yeah.
number of different explanations as to why, but it is interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What is your favorite principle? The one you have the most fun um, sort of actioning against or using or leaning into when you work with your clients?
Um, So that's an interesting question because, I have a tendency to choose the principle based on what the marketing challenge at hand is.
You
So I
should.
don't want to say like, oh, I always like to use social proof because maybe that's not
Mhm.
the answer. It's really, we kind of custom create our marketing message based on what the individual. But that said, one of the most underused principles that I happen to really enjoy, and I use it when I can, is the idea of rhyme is reason bias. And it's this finding that not
Mm.
only are rhyming phrases more memorable, but rhyming phrases are actually considered more believable. So you can have the same uh, woes unite foes, woes unite enemies. That they both say the same thing, they both convey the same information. Woes unite foes rhymes, woes unite enemies does not rhyme. And research has shown that people believe the rhyming phrase to be the more truthful, the more accurate one. They find it to be more credible. And the reason is rhyming phrases are easier for the human brain to process. And when something is easy for the brain to
Mm.
process, it feels right. And if something feels right, it's not a big leap to assume that it is right. And so when you think about, the old days, the madman days, there are a lot of rhyming taglines, right? Timex, it takes a licking and keeps on ticking, or Elka-Seltzer, plop, plop,
Yeah.
oh, what a relief it is. But these rhyming phrases are starting to work their way back in, right? I'm thinking about if it's COVID, Paxlovid, right? Like they're starting to work their way back in, or maybe I'm just more aware of them. But I think it's a fabulous opportunity for us as marketers because if people have a tendency to not only remember rhyming phrases but also believe them more, that's a win-win for us. So it could be a tagline or a slogan, it could be a subject line, it could be a headline in an ad, or the content title that
Mhm.
we're using, but the opportunity or the call to action, don't delay, register today, right?
Yeah.
The opportunity to use a rhyming phrase is a nice one to embrace because it gives us that double benefit of memorability and believability. So
Yeah.
that's one of my faves.
It's really entertaining too. Can we bring back the jingle, Nancy?
Well,
I think
I
there's
think we
something
should.
about but I think there's something about the phonetics of it too. It just rolls out the tongue. You can remember it easily. I'm listening to you and I'm hearing sort of these amazing things about atomic habits and how take away the friction. Lean into sort of the natural sort of autopilot things, take away the friction and to truly connect. And I feel like that's what rhyming is. It just flows. Yeah, that's a really fun one. I like that one. Is there one that you feel is there another one that is typically not used as much or you don't have and you feel that it might be on its way back? Is there another one of those?
Well, we talked a little bit earlier about autonomy bias, and we talked about
Mhm.
the BYIF technique, right? But you were free, and just the idea of letting people have a choice. And I think that simply providing choices, not too many choices. If you have too many choices, you know, analysis paralysis sets in. People love their choices, but then they don't know what one to choose. But two is almost always better than one. Three is a number of choices is very good. There's a magic that three is that magic number. People have a tendency to go for the middle. And I think sometimes we forget. Sometimes we're so caught up in trying to sell our product or service that we're like, we want to recommend this is for you. Like, oh, I found the right one for you, Isabel. This is perfect for you. This is the one that you should get. And, we might be better off saying, you know what, here are two that, which of these is the most interesting? Because if you put one thing in front of someone, the question is, do I or do I not want this one thing? I don't know. There's no context. There's no comparison.
Mhm.
So people say, I'll do some research. I'll Google it, or I'll talk to my neighbor, or I'll talk to my colleague, or I'll talk to my spouse. And then they don't get around to doing it, right? Life intervenes, they get busy, and the buying moment disappears. But when you put two things in
Mhm.
front of someone, the question isn't, do I or do I not want this? It's, oh, which of these two do I want? And it's almost a
Yeah.
foregone conclusion. You're going to choose one of them. I mean, there's a third option. Don't go there. We're like, oh, there's two. Which of
Yeah.
these two? Because it's easy. There's context. There's comparison. The brain likes to take the easy way out, and by giving someone a choice, we
Mhm.
make it easy for them to decide. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there. It doesn't get used as often as it could, I think, by marketers. If we just try to figure out a different
Mhm.
way to, or not a different way, but we try to find a way to put a choice in front of someone, we're more likely to get that buying decision in the moment.
Yeah, I think there's nothing like assuming people will follow or assuming people will just do it instead of actually sort of going and saying, "Oh, maybe they will, maybe they won't." And I think as a moderator, I think there's something really interesting where just assume people got out of bed with the best intentions and they're there to help you and just assume they're going to partake. Don't think, don't be nervous about, will they do this? Will they not? People pick up on it. There's something around the tone. There's nothing like an assuming something close. Like I love how I was when I coach and train new moderators, and I have over the years, I've had the privilege of doing that. It's really interesting when I say, well, make sure that you know how you can bias your group. So we literally have so that you intentionally not bias your group. And so we do a lot of things to actually say, okay, so let's make sure that you want people to actually react positively to this idea. How would you make sure that that happens? And it's really interesting how people actually, the moderators that I will coach, will actually lean into all these things. They'll assume things, they'll laugh about it. The tone is different, the pitch is different. Like there's a lot of things that you can do just if you assume that people are. So you create a bias by literally not opening up yourself to a no or to a negative response or something of likes, which is very much the same thing, which is never giving someone the choice that they can opt out. I think that applies to parenting, doesn't it? I feel like that I could apply to parenting very well. Like I feel like you could go, either you choose A for breakfast or B, and then that's it. Like there's no opting out of breakfast. There's no opting out of. Either you choose A or B and then follow my lead. Walk with me, we're going. I feel there's parenting
I love
advice
that,
in
Isabel.
here.
So several people have said to me, I want to use these techniques, or I do use these techniques with my kids, and it's like, do you want you want to wear the yellow dress or the blue dress? But one way or another, you're getting dressed. But by giving
Voilà.
them that choice, it really makes a difference. And then your earlier point though about not unintentionally biasing or accidentally biasing people in focus groups, I think that's such a strong point because we do cruise along on autopilot.
Mhm.
We do, because we do have cognitive, without even realizing it, so when you're trying to do research, being aware of that is really critical because how you conduct the research, how you ask the question, how you, expose the people in the group to the stimuli can make a difference. Can actually, put a thumb on the scale when you don't want that to happen. You want to intentionally, make sure that you're not leading people in one direction or another, or if you're leading them, the direction you're leading them in is be open and honest, and tell me what you're
Voilà.
feeling. And I think that is so powerful. That's such a good point to make because, just like I'd be sitting in the back room watching, and you'd sometimes get one person who was dominant in a group who would be down on something, and the
Mhm.
whole group would follow, and you would just go, but then a skillful moderator would be able to kind of slip in, intercept that, and rebalance it so that that wouldn't happen. And and then stepping back just a little bit earlier than that, how the moderator initially poses the question also
Yeah.
can start to influence things. And your point about not unintentionally biasing people is a really strong one. I mean, that's in my opinion, that's one of the ways we can tell a good focus group person, a good researcher, a good consumer insights
Mhm.
person from one who is an also ran, if you will.
Yeah. But I think there's nothing like reading a room. There's nothing like reading a room, gauging, and being very self aware. Like we constantly do, very much like you test your campaigns. I love how you say, let's test it, one way, let's test it the other, let's see what happens. We do the same thing. It's really interesting as moderators. We'll do, just focus groups as tests, and we'll go, well, if we ask the question this way, if we ask the question that way, what happens? I've even found, and there's nothing like being in the moment because it goes live and reading a room, because I've found in some circumstances where, you do deep work, ethnography work, and whatnot, and the person really, because if you want to, if you like the best, I there's always this thing, but the short story is the best way to flirt with someone is to get them to open up and get them to talk about themselves. Human nature, everybody loves talking about themselves. So they will feel like they've known you forever, even though they don't even know your last name. Like that's a human insight that as a moderator and ethnographer you lean into, which is great. But I found in some cases that people connected to the extent that they wanted to be very helpful, which is human nature, but they started giving me positive feedback. And so sometimes you do have to get back and say, not my ideas. Did not, like, it's not, if you want to, the more you like me, the more honest you are, the more constructive your feedback is, the more candid you are, because it's not about liking what we're talking about. That's not going to help me. So the more you like, so at one point there are some groups sometimes that you see like there's a real jive, like it just, people are people, some people connect better than others, and you see there's something, and then you do have to read the room and actually say, hey, you know what, love you dearly, I think we're on to something, this is awesome, we're having a great moment, however, the more you like me, the more honest you are, so please tell me the truth, is that really how you feel about it? So I've seen those sort of moments once in a while as well, which is kind of
Yeah, yeah,
interesting.
no, it is interesting. I've watched moderators say, "Hey, listen, I don't work for this company. I didn't do this ad I'm about to show you.
Mhm.
Like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. Like, I really do want you to be honest." And it's interesting. They say sometimes you'll tell your life story to a stranger on a plane. Like if you feel that connection, you
Mhm.
can be incredibly honest. And you may never see that person again, but you find yourself
Mhm.
saying things that maybe you wouldn't have told your best friend. But getting people to and it's incredibly valuable when you can get people to do it. When I've sat, behind
Yeah.
the mirror listening to focus groups, sometimes my best ideas have come from what people say, and it's not, when they were asked, "Do you or do you not like this?" or "Why did you buy this?" or "Why didn't you?" But it's the conversations in the margins, if you will, where they're just talking about their life or their needs or their goals, or and
Mhm.
that's where like some of the really rich material would come out for me when I'd be trying to think about a campaign or how to write an ad or a email or something for clients. It's a little bit more cut and dry when you hold an ad and say, because people don't always know if it would make
Yeah.
them buy. If you talk about the buying process and what you were trying to accomplish, that can get very rich. Or at least, for me, I'd be sitting in the back scribbling notes, and the next day I'd have like a whole nother campaign.
Yeah, and I think that's the question. I think it's getting people to walk through, like share stories, getting people listening to their stories, listening to what they were trying to accomplish and what their intents were, versus having them explain to you why they did things. Because everybody will default to trying to make sense of it. To your earlier discussion, this notion of trying to make sense of it, trying to rationalize it. And of course, if someone says, why did you do that? I mean, I just revert back to my mom, just catching me with my hand down the cookie jar. I mean, I'm like, cause I don't know. Like it's tough to actually try to explain why you're doing things. You're like, cause. So I think if you have storytelling and so forth, I think you get to your point, yeah, and then you have the tools to actually use behavioral science properly because you probably better know your people. So I think there's something there for sure. Nancy, this was
Yeah, yeah,
amazing.
absolutely.
Yeah, this was amazing. We've had so
No, I
many
really enjoyed
content.
it.
I mean, Carl wants us to bring back the jingle, so I think just us, we can bring back jingles. You've got my vote. I really want a good jingle. I feel like I still remember all the jingles from when I was a kid. Um, so definitely something there. Um, so I always finish my podcasts with a French twist because I speak French. I'm fluent in both languages, and this is kind of short, rapid version of Bernard Pivot's Bouillon de Culture, which is kind of 4 key questions. And I was told that you'd be okay to play the game. Are you still up for it?
Absolutely.
Okay. So amazing. So the first question, and this is kind of interesting, understanding sort of your background and whatnot, but what is your favorite word?
You. I think my favorite word is you. I've been asked before if I had to choose a single word to start every campaign I wrote, every direct mail letter, every email, every social post, I would choose the word you. And I think it's incredibly effective. When people are reading, they'll gloss over I, we, our company, our product name, but they'll zero in on the word you because you is a substitute for themselves. So I think you is incredibly preferred. And as a result, it's my favorite.
Hmm. Amazing. What is your least favorite word?
I think my least favorite word is solution, only because it's gotten overused, particularly in B2B. You'll go to somebody's website and they'll talk about their solution and how it's perfect for today's CEO, and you still won't have any idea, well, is it a CRM, system, or is it
Hmm.
a asset management? So like, I don't know what you're selling. Like solution, it's like, buy my stuff, buy my thing. So I think solution has been kind of corrupted, and as a result, it's become like one of my least
Yeah.
favorite words. It's just not specific enough.
Yeah. And is everybody solving a problem? Or are we sometimes enhancing something or shifting things? Or yeah, are we all solutions or providing solutions is what I would tag on to that. I agree with you. Um, I know you're clearly in love with behavioral science. You love what you do. You are extremely successful in it. But what profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
When I was younger, still in high school, I thought I wanted to be an attorney. And I think it was coming from the same place, which is, the idea of convincing people and persuading people. And I thought law would be very interesting because it was an opportunity to come down hard on one side and try to convince people that, you had the right answer, you had the right side. So that's always fascinated me. I'm happy, very happy in marketing, but,
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. I understand. I love the storytelling. I love building a case. And so coming to a conclusion, sharing that conclusion, that recommendation, and then walking back and bring people in on sort of the story and what led us to that, which I guess is kind of the same because I have a lot of friends that went to law school and I did, yeah, there was too much study involved, to be quite honest. Yeah, not gonna happen. That was not going to happen for me. And then the last one is my favorite one, which is if I can have a favorite question when I do these podcasts. But what is the best thing a mentor has shared with you or told you over the years that has stayed with you that you still use as a North Star or guiding principle these days?
years ago, a mentor said to me, spend at least an hour a day brand. You spend a lot of time working on our client's brand, a lot of time working for the agency, spend at least an hour a day working on your personal brand. Always
Mm.
stayed with me, and I think it served me well. And at the time, I wasn't sure what to do with that advice. I was like, oh, okay, okay. And then, but I started to try to act on it a little bit more, tried to, really embrace it. And it literally has stayed with me my entire career. And now I look back on it and I realize what smart advice it was and how lucky I was that this mentor shared it with me.
Yeah, I love that. It's like career equity. No one can ever take it away from you because it's not associated to someone else necessarily. It's your own, very much like a diploma or like an award of some sort or book of some sort or I love that. That's fabulous advice. I might steal that. May I? Can you still hear me? Did it cut out?
No, I
Oh,
heard you say that's
you're back.
fascinating. And then,
I just said
sorry.
that's fascinating. Can I steal it? Can I keep it? I think that's a fabulous piece of advice.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can absolutely steal it and keep it. And you know what's interesting, Isabel, is when that advice was given to me, talking about aging ourselves, it was before the proliferation of social media. Because now you think about it, and it's like it's easy to spend an hour doing personal branding because we have LinkedIn, we have Facebook, we have Threads, we have
Mhm.
Twitter. It's not that difficult. But this was way before the explosion of social media, and it was just such great advice then, and it continues to be great advice now. So absolutely, run with it. It's yours. My gift
Yeah.
to you.
Thank you. And I think to your point, having added that context to it, I do think outside LinkedIn, outside social media, and sort of the obvious things, you can still work on your personal brand. You can do it sort of with the network around you, with the people around you. You don't have to take it online either. I think it's still true in real life, aside from every sort of tool that we have out there. So I think, thank you for that extra context. I think that adds even more meaning to the piece of advice. Yeah, I think that's fabulous. Thank you so much, Nancy. This was amazing. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We had so much engagement. So many people actually. There's a lot of love on the board. There's a lot of love for your book. I mean, to listeners out there, if you haven't picked up a copy yet, do pick up a copy. It's fabulous. Nancy is amazing. Thank you so much for spending an hour with me, just chit chatting. It was a pleasure.
It's been my complete pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining, for listening us to tune in. Please do stay tuned for the next episode. We'll have more inspiration and insight for sure. And until then, all the best and take care.